Did you ever sit in class on a train and think to yourself, man, wouldn't it be great if I could play Team Fortress 2 right now? But considering it's impossible to carry a physical computer and monitor with you at all times, this was always an unobtainable goal. Well, not anymore, because with Gangfort you can now play Team Fortress 2 on your phone at all times. Alright, not really, but it's very close. Gangfort is essentially Team Fortress 2, just with a 2D perspective for Android. It contains all 9 classes as well as sentries, backstabbing, übercharges, cloaking and disguising, and much more. It's a really nice game, but barely anyone seems to actually know about it, which is why I decided to give it a small review. Now, some people might consider it a ripoff, but I don't think that's the case. Not only was it made by a TF2 fan that seemed to genuinely love the original, but removing an entire dimension changes the gameplay a lot. Don't get me wrong, it still feels and plays like you'd expect a TF game to play, but you will encounter some differences and quirks which I'm gonna explain in this video. The game used to cost around $2 and I was actually one of the first people to buy it. Nowadays it's free to play, but you can buy certain items in-game. It also apparently has some ads after dying, which is pretty freaking annoying. However, that is only a problem when you play online, and I will explain later on why it's not such a big issue anyway. But if you're curious if this game is good or not, just stay tuned for this review. Here we go! When you look at the gameplay in the background, I'm sure a lot of you will go, hey, wait a second, this is just Gang Garrison 2. And you would be right, as both games share a lot of similarities. However, I think that's more due to the limitations that come with translating a 3D game into a 2D one. Of course, you're gonna have to scale down on a lot of features. There's no teleporters or dispensers, no medkits or ammo pickups, and every class only has one single weapon. But unlike in Gang Garrison 2, you also don't need to reload anymore, which is very nice. All bullets are now projectiles instead of hit scan. That means that there is still a very big emphasis on fast movement and dodging out of the way of attacks. Jump height has also been increased, of course, and you seem to even float in the air a bit as well. All in all, moving around feels natural and comfortable. However, there is one very big issue that messes with the movement, which I will address near the end of this video. Compared to Gang Garrison 2, this game has one very big advantage when it comes to gameplay. Gang Garrison 2 is strictly multiplayer only, whereas Gangfort has a single player option with bots alongside multiplayer. This is a very big plus, as you don't have to rely on finding actual players. Sadly though, the multiplayer portion of Gangfort seems to be entirely dead now. Maybe this is for the better, however, as the only time I ever tried it out, it only seemed to have a handful of players anyway. I would be sad about it, but playing with bots works so brilliantly that I don't even care. The bot AI is actually very well made, and it's pretty complex for such a simple game. They can find their way throughout the levels just fine and also take alternate routes. They even switch classes now and then, and they're not too bad at revealing spies either. They're also incredibly difficult to fight against at times because their aiming is very good. It's passable, though an option to scale down the difficulty would be nice. When setting up a server, you can also adjust the amount of bots to your liking, however. So all in all, I'd say they offer up a very viable option to playing with other people, which is also not even possible anymore. Luckily for anyone who's played TF2, the classes in Gangfort are pretty much identical. The scout, called Russia, is the fastest of them all. He, or she, has a scattergun as well and can even double jump. He's quite fun to play if you can get used to the controls. The Marine replaces the soldier. He has a rocket launcher, of course, which also does some splash damage. The explosions may be very small, but they pack quite a punch. I think his biggest strength is being able to rocket jump, however, as it allows for a lot of mobility. Next up is the Pyro, aka Torcher. He is way too weak. His flames don't seem to do enough damage, and the range of his flamethrower is way too short. If you run towards an enemy, your flames don't even move as far as when you're running away from someone. Not even the afterburn seems all that useful. Overall, I think this is the worst class compared to the others. At least Gang Garrison 2 gave him a flare gun as well. The demo, called Yesh, is much stronger though. He can't sticky jump or anything because he only has a grenade launcher. Sounds bad, but it makes up for it in damage. I think the reason he doesn't have a sticky launcher is because it would have been a bit too difficult for a mobile game. If that's true, then it was a very good decision. However, it would have been nice if he could use his explosions to do higher jumps as well. The Heavy is replaced with the Mass. His minigun is pretty freaking dangerous, and he has a ton of HP, just like in TF2. I actually rarely die with him because of that. The only problem with him is running out of ammo. Aside from that, he is a ton of fun to play, get it? The Engineer, aka Builder, really lives up to his name. For self-defense, he has a very powerful shotgun as well as a turret. The turret is pretty strong, it just takes some time for it to turn around. It also doesn't have that big of a range, sadly. The builder needs metal to build turret, which luckily recharges. But it does it so slowly that it's actually faster to just kill yourself and respawn than to wait for it. It's pretty fun to play though, and combining the shotgun with the turret is very powerful. Medic is called Healer and does exactly that. He can't overheal anyone and also not regenerate health. However, his Uber charge more than makes up for it. You can spread your Uber to all teammates with no penalty and you can still cap points while being charged. If it sounds a bit overpowered, that's because it is. Oh, and he also has a syringe gun, which works mildly alright. There isn't much to say about the camper, who is actually the sniper. He has a sniper rifle and can also zoom in. I don't think you can headshot and it doesn't even do much damage, but if you charge it for a bit, it's much stronger. Other than that, watch your back for the next class. The Spy, or rather the Agent, who is the most complex class. Just like in TF2, he can disguise himself and even turn himself invisible. Aside from that, he can also backstab. It's not even a backstab because it also insta-kills enemies if you hit them in the front with it. It is very hard to pull off, however, and you can't even move while doing so, so it balances out. If that's not enough for you, he also gets a revolver. All in all, the classes are very nice recreations of the one from TF2. They are very simplified, but their core mechanics are still intact and they play about the same. The most quote-unquote recent update added unlockable weapons and hats for the classes as well as a loadout system. You could get these items either by logging in every day or by purchasing them for real money. Unfortunately, the service seems to be dead like the multiplayer as well. If you had bought items before, you can still use them, but you can't seem to get any new ones. I will get to the hats later, but I can address the weapons now. They were kinda just... I never really understood the point of them. The ones I received were a paper plane gun for medic and a milk minigun. Yes, that's the thing. They seem to function differently from stocks, such as the one for medic, which shoots exploding paper planes at a lower firing rate. The minigun seems to be identical, however. I'm not sure about the other unlockable weapons, as I never got the chance to try them out and it doesn't seem like I ever will. It doesn't really matter though, because the standard weapons work perfectly well. At the point of riding, there are only 2 maps in the game. Well, there's 3, but for some reason it crashes the game if you attempt to play it. The 2 maps that do work, however, are King of the Hill and a payload mode. Both of them are very fun to play and function just like in TF2. Because I'm not a very huge fan of Korth, I usually stick to playing the payload one. That one is also a lot easier to win if you're on the defending side, because you can just spam projectiles down the tunnel that the enemy has to push the bomb through. For some weird reason though, it requires 2 players to push the bomb up the hill. This makes winning unnecessarily harder for the attacking team. If you look at TF2, you can theoretically win every single game mode by yourself. Sure, it's hard, but not impossible. In Gangfort though, not so much. Luckily, the bots actually go after the bomb, which means you can actually win. In multiplayer, however, not so sure. Then again, I never really played with other players and it's not like you can do it anymore either. The third map, the one that doesn't work, was just Capture the Flag. Back when it first came out, it used to work, something I actually experienced. And after having played it, I can say that it's... It's not awful or anything, it just seemed bare bones. There wasn't much going on that made it really special, besides some holes in the floor filled with fire that killed you instantly. Aside from that, it was really just Capture the Flag. I never played it much, so I can't really talk much about it. But it's not available anyway, so it doesn't even matter. The levels themselves offer a lot of different paths for you to take. They aren't very big, but considering it's a mobile game, it fits, since you don't want to spend more than 5 minutes on one map. However, I think adding things like teleporters, jump pads, water, moving platforms or others would have made them more fun. The graphics are superb. Most of the detail lies in the backgrounds, which look just like something you'd find in TF2, just with a lower resolution. And like in Team Fortress 2, the game also utilizes warmer, more natural earth tones. The game looks and feels exactly like TF2. Player sprites are much more saturated and darker than the backgrounds, which really helps them stand out. I'm not a fan of their designs, however, they seem way too simplistic. The silhouette is also almost identical, with the difference being only a few pixels here and there. They also all have the exact same pose, which really makes it hard to differentiate them sometimes. Projectiles also aren't team colored, which makes it very unclear at times if you're supposed to evade them or not. It's interesting to see that they deem TF2's art direction and colors important enough to copy, but completely disregarded the distinct character designs. Even their animations are mostly just alright. It's presentable, but could have been done a lot better. The hats pretty much ruin the art style, however. They are completely out of place and look way too outlandish, even more so than in TF2. Even worse, however, they make it harder to tell which class is which, because most, if not all hats can be equipped by any class. Why they ever thought adding hats was a good idea, I don't know. The foreground also uses darker and more saturated colors than the background, which makes it very easy to tell where you can and can't go. However, obstacles like boxes sometimes just blend in with the background. You won't even notice that it's there until your character just suddenly stops because you ran into it. Darker colors or even a dark outline for those are absolutely necessary in my opinion. It doesn't happen very often, mostly only on the Korth map, but it still ruins the gameplay somewhat. Weapon attacks and effects are very flashy and colorful, which makes shooting a lot of fun. I also really appreciate the effects on the sniper rifle. It limits your view but still makes the screen nice to look at. Things like the HUD and the GUI are also very simplistic, but they work very well. Overall, I'd say that the graphics are a very big strong point and work in favor of the gameplay. The sound is pretty much alright. There's only one song in the entire game which plays on a loop. It sounds perfectly fine, though nothing to write home about. The same goes for sound effects. They're kinda juicy and retro inspired, but also very simplistic and nothing special. All in all, it's serviceable. Gangfort has some pretty annoying bugs and glitches. I've experienced countless game crashes. Sometimes the game just showed me a black screen when I booted it up. Other times the game would just freeze, especially when I tapped out of it. Mostly it was alright, however. I can't speak for the multiplayer, but single player worked just fine. But there were a couple of smaller bugs like sentries not targeting enemies, the kill feed and kill cam not working correctly, and some issues with the enemy pathfinding. The slopes are also a bit awkward to navigate. It's nothing game breaking, however. A few patches here and there would work wonders for the game though. Now let me get to my biggest gripe with the game, the controls. Don't get me wrong, they're fine. You get 2 joysticks on the screen as well as a few buttons. For medic you also need to tap on teammates you want to heal. The problem is just that the game works very poorly on a tablet. Now, I don't own a smartphone, only an Android tablet. But because of that, I can barely play the darn game. The buttons are way too small and too far apart and the screen is way too slippery. At times the buttons wouldn't even register properly. Not sure if that was the game's fault or rather the tablet's fault for not registering my input. Maybe the game plays better on a phone, but not that I'd know. But using a touchscreen as a controller just doesn't work in my opinion. However, there's still a lot of ways to customize the controls. You can move all the buttons around on the screen and you can even select between 2 joysticks or just using arrow keys for movement. I just wish there were more options such as making the buttons bigger. Alternatively, it would be a lot better if you could just tap on the screen to look and shoot wherever you wanted and using the joystick only for movement. I think that would make combat a lot easier. It's just too hard for me to play otherwise unless I put the tablet on a desk. It also doesn't really help that using an actual controller crashes the game. Just to clarify, it might work perfectly well on a regular phone, just not really on a tablet. Keep that in mind. So, is the game good or not? Let's look at the positives. You can play it in single player, which is very good if your internet is bad or you can't find any players. The gameplay is a lot of fun and also very fast paced, which is very fitting for a mobile game. The classes are some very accurate recreations of the ones from TF2 and the graphics are also quite pleasant. The negatives are that the multiplayer and loadout are effectively dead, and there's only 2 maps and they aren't very interesting. Some of the classes are also overpowered and others underpowered and they all look a bit similar at times. There are also some bugs and glitches and the game doesn't control well on a tablet. It even shows you ads upon death, which is not really a problem however, as that only applies to multiplayer. Overall, I'd say it's very worth it. It's a very short but sweet game. It's not as addictive as other mobile games, but if you just want to play a TF2-like game on the go, then this is exactly what you want. Just don't expect anything more than what you get, and what you get are a few minutes of quick fun. Coincidentally, a few minutes of quick fun also describes my love life. Just kidding, no one loves me. On a side note, also don't expect any more updates in the future. The most recent one was in July of 2016, so it seems like the developer lost interest. So I would advise playing it while you still can before it's taken off the Google Play Store. I do hope it's eventually updated again, and if it is, then I'm hoping for some more maps and bug fixes, that would be enough for me. But that concludes this review. If you're interested, go check the game out, the link is in the description. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters, namely Lasse Soybjörk, LECT Kane, Mr. Denk, Nick Soiker, Zachary Leclerc, Xenomite and Sepaiser Man. If you want to support me on Patreon too, then I would really appreciate that. You don't have to, however, because just watching my videos and perhaps even subscribing is more than enough. But anyway, that is it for this video. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.